San Quentin isn't just a prison, it's a warning. A place where California sends the men it fears most: killers, lifers, and legends carved in concrete. Behind these walls, time doesn't pass, it hunts you. And tonight, you're going inside. Before we step through California's Iron Gate, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because what you're about to see is real, brutal, and unforgettable. Now, follow me. The door is opening. San Quentin State Prison sits on the edge of the San Francisco Bay like a fortress carved out of time, California's oldest operating prison, born in 1852 and still very much alive. But the word alive is misleading. San Quentin doesn't breathe, it waits. It stands there like a steel giant, chained to the coastline, watching the world change while its own interior stays frozen in all the worst eras of American punishment. When a bus of new arrivals pulls up to the Sally Port, the atmosphere shifts. Even seasoned correctional officers admit there's something different about San Quentin, something heavier, something that feels like history pressing down on every inch of concrete. The moment that gate slides open, the world you knew ends in a single, echoing groan of metal. For the inmates coming in, that sound becomes the punctuation at the end of their old life. Some arrive stone-faced, pretending they're ready. Others try to mask the tremble in their hands with forced confidence. A few legitimately believe they'll adapt. But deep down, all of them feel the same chill. San Quentin is not a place you conquer. It's a place that strips you down, slowly, methodically, completely. Inside the receiving and release unit R&R, fresh prisoners stand shoulder to shoulder on the worn linoleum floor, clutching manila envelopes containing everything the state says they're allowed to have. Shoes scrape. A loudspeaker crackles overhead. Officers process them with mechanical efficiency, their voices monotone, like they've said these sentences thousands of times. Face the wall. Don't talk. Keep your hands visible. But what really shakes newcomers isn't the officers. It's the inmates already inside. San Quentin veterans know exactly how to study a fresh face. The yard bulls, men who've spent decades beneath this roof, can read your entire past in a single glance. They know who's scared, who's faking, who's likely to fold, and who might be stupid enough to resist the order of things. The gangs notice too. California prison yards operate like political territories divided by invisible borders. Every man must know where he stands, literally. A wrong step can mean a stabbing. In the first 48 hours, new arrivals are quietly assessed by their racial groups, their charges, their potential value, and whether they bring trouble with them. In San Quentin, the politics are ancient and rigid. Weakness is currency, and everyone is trading. But San Quentin is more than the gangs. More than the violence. More than the legends whispered in lower-tier cells at 2 a.m. It's a paradox, one of the deadliest maximum security prisons in the U.S., but also home to pioneering rehabilitation programs, award-winning newspapers, and men who've found more purpose behind bars than they ever had outside. Walking deeper into the prison, the noise grows louder, shouts from the tiers, metal clinking against metal, the hum of industrial fans forcing old air through older hallways. The cell blocks are stacked like concrete honeycombs, each window a portal into a different life sentence. And inside those cells are men who've been here so long that modern society looks like science fiction to them. Some inmates have watched San Quentin transform from a place of unchecked brutality to a symbol of criminal justice reform. Others remember the days when riots lit the tiers and guards patrolled with a very different philosophy. The tension between old and new is etched into the very walls. Modern security cameras bolted over rusting bars, fresh coats of paint applied over decades of graffiti, digital ID scanners sitting beside corkboards that look like relics from 1974. But if you ask the men who've lived here the longest, they'll all tell you the same thing. The building changes. The rules change. The faces change. San Quentin doesn't. Its culture, its hierarchy, its invisible code, those things have deeper roots than any reform effort can reach. As night falls over the bay, the prison lights flicker on, illuminating the yard in a cold, harsh glow. From above, San Quentin resembles a medieval castle fused with an industrial wasteland. The clang of the final lockdown bell echoes through every tier. Doors slam shut in rapid succession, the sound rolling like thunder across the cell blocks. And in that moment, With darkness pressing in and only a sliver of moonlight slicing across the bars, every man inside knows one truth. When you enter San Quentin, the door behind you closes forever. Even if your sentence doesn't. The prison yard at San Quentin is unlike any other in America. It's a stage, a battlefield, a marketplace, a political arena, an entire world operating under its own ancient laws. Any inmate will tell you, your life in San Quentin doesn't happen in the cell, it happens in the yard. The yard is where loyalties are made, debts are paid, rules are enforced, and futures are destroyed. When the doors crack open for morning yard time, the rush begins. Men pour out like a tide, millions of steps that have worn grooves into the concrete over decades. The sunlight is sharp, bouncing off razor wire coils and the bay waters beyond the walls. It gives the illusion of freedom, but the inmates know better. You can see the world from here, but never touch it. The invisible lines are already drawn. From the moment you step foot onto the yard, everything is controlled by politics. Not state politics, prison politics. Rules enforced not by guards, but by the inmates who run the hierarchy. These aren't suggestions. They're mandatory, and violations are dealt with immediately and violently. The white inmates gather in one area, structured, rigid, disciplined. The northern Hispanics hold another, tightly organized and vigilant. The southern Hispanics operate with military precision, their leadership structure so deeply ingrained it could rival a cartel's chain of command. The black groups, diverse, complex, resilient, occupy their own zone, each set navigating its alliances and rivalries. The others, Asian, Pacific Islanders, Native American groups, maintain smaller but tightly bonded territories. Everyone knows who belongs where. Everyone knows who doesn't. A man stepping into the wrong area isn't just making a mistake, he's sending a message, whether he meant to or not. And messages here have consequences. The yard workers, lifers who've taken on unofficial policing roles, notice everything. A handshake that shouldn't happen, a conversation between races that lasts too long, a newcomer who doesn't seem to understand the choreography of fear. Even the guards know to keep their distance unless absolutely necessary. San Quentin's yard doesn't belong to them, and they're smart enough not to pretend it does. From the observation tower above, a correctional officer watches through binoculars. He's seen dozens of stabbings on this yard, some so fast and silent that the victim didn't realize he'd been hit until he collapsed. Homemade weapons are the currency of power here: bone crushers, flat pieces of metal sharpened on concrete, toothbrush handles melted into handles for steel slivers, and more elaborate tools smuggled through unimaginable methods. Yet beneath the violence, something else exists here too, something contradictory. The yard is also where the prison's most human moments unfold. The basketball court hosts daily games that move with the intensity of professional leagues. The handball players, some old enough to be grandfathers, hit the wall with a speed that shocks newcomers. On one corner, men jog laps around the track, trying to outrun time itself. In another, a small group gathers around a chessboard, silently battling on squares worn down by decades of concentration. And then there are the men who simply stand, faces tilted toward the sun, small moments of peace in a place built to crush it. But peace doesn't last long. Not in San Quentin. On a normal day, a single glance can shift the atmosphere from calm to deadly. A disagreement at the phones, a debt unpaid, an accusation of snitching, tensions ignite like sparks in dry grass. When the yard goes bad, it happens fast. The southern Hispanics move first, forming a loose circle. The blacks tighten their perimeter, eyes scanning for threats. The whites redirect their conversations toward their seniors, waiting for instructions. The others take defensive positions. The guards above grip their rifles tighter. Everyone feels the shift. Even the seagulls circling overhead seem to pull away from the yard. Most days, violence is avoided not out of mercy, but because everyone knows the consequences. A riot shuts down privileges, cancels visits, locks down the prison for weeks, sometimes months. Power isn't just about force, it's about control. But when someone breaks the rules, when a man owes more than he can pay, or disrespects the wrong leader, or refuses to follow the politics, San Quentin handles it the way it always has. Direct. Brutal. Final. Yet what outsiders never understand is this: The yard is also where some inmates transform. Programs run under the same sky where stabbings once occurred, anger management groups, veteran circles, drug recovery meetings, and rehabilitation efforts led by lifers who have nothing left but the hope of helping someone else avoid their fate. Sometimes, rival groups will silently agree to temporary peace just so a program can continue without interruption. For a moment, men who've spent years on opposite sides of invisible lines sit 10 feet apart, listening to stories of trauma, regret, and redemption. And when the bell rings for yard recall, the atmosphere shifts again. Conversations end mid-sentence. Basketballs roll to a stop. Chess pieces are abandoned. The track empties. The yard drains of life until all that remains is the wind off the bay and the watchtower's unblinking stare. The invisible lines disappear. Until tomorrow. Because in San Quentin, the yard isn't just a place. It's a law. A battlefield. And the ultimate judge of who survives, who falls, and who learns to navigate the politics that rule California's Iron Gate. North Block is the beating, roaring, metallic heart of San Quentin, a 5-tier giant of rusted railings, echoing voices, and decades of compressed human history. If the yard is the prison's political arena, North Block is its city, a vertical maze of cages stacked to the ceiling, each one holding a story that was too dangerous, too chaotic, or too tragic for the outside world. Walking into North Block is like stepping onto the set of a film you were never meant to see. The noise hits you first, a chaotic symphony of shouting, slamming doors, radios playing music from 3 different eras, the clatter of metal bowls scraping along concrete floors, and the deep, rhythmic hum of hundreds of men simply existing in too little space. Then you smell it. Sweat. Metal. Soap. Instant coffee. Foot powder. The sharp sting of disinfectant. The faint traces of desperation clinging to every bar. It's overwhelming, unforgettable, and permanent. No one forgets their first walk through North Block. The architecture itself is a relic of 19th-century punishment philosophy: tall, narrow tiers with railings worn smooth by a century of hands, catwalks suspended above empty space, cells barely wide enough for 2 men to pass each other without touching. Each tier has its own personality, its own rhythms, its own leaders, its own unspoken rules. Tier 1 is rough. Raw. It's where new arrivals often end up, jittery and overwhelmed, trying to map out the unspoken codes of survival. It's also where tempers flare quicker, partly because this is where the most movement happens, men going to programs, medical, work assignments, all of it funnels through these lower levels. More movement means more friction. More friction means more violence. Tier 3 is calmer, usually. It's where the programmers live, men who stay out of trouble and stick to routines, workouts, reading, studying, maintaining predictable schedules that help them stay sane. But even this tier has its ghosts, lifers who've been here since the 80s or 90s, men who remember riots that turned these walkways into rivers of panic and blood. The higher you go, the older the energy feels. Tier 5 is quiet, eerily quiet. These are the long haulers, the men doing decades, double-decade bids, or life. Some have stopped counting years altogether. They've seen the system change, the culture shift, the faces come and go. They've watched cellmates die, watched officers retire, watched San Quentin struggle through reforms and tragedies. These men hold knowledge like currency, and newcomers quickly learn that wisdom often comes from those who've lost the most. But no matter the tier, the size of the cells remains the same: a 6x9 concrete box, 2 bunks, a stainless steel toilet sink combo, and barely enough standing room for 2 people to breathe comfortably. When 2 men share a space like this for years, even small habits become survival issues: how loud someone snores, how often they clean, how neatly they fold their clothes, whether they flush at night or wait till morning. One small annoyance can become a feud. One argument can become a fight. One fight, the wrong fight, can get someone removed from the block in handcuffs or a body bag. Politics don't stop at the cell door either. Inmates can't just choose any cellmate. Racial lines and affiliations matter. Some men request single cell status, but that's rarely granted unless someone has a documented history of violence, severe mental health issues, or a long list of enemies. The noise in North Block is ceaseless. Even at night, when the lights dim and officers walk with flashlights shining through the bars, The block hums with the low murmur of late conversations, the clatter of dominoes on metal tables, and the occasional burst of laughter that echoes through the tiers like a ghost of the world these men once knew. Every sound in North Block travels. Even secrets. Especially secrets. From one end of the block to the other, communication flows through a network older than most inmates hear. Whispered messages, kites, slide across floors pushed by sticks or strings. Information is currency. A warning of a pending fight might slide under a door. A request for protection. A coded message to hold someone accountable. Even in one of the most monitored prisons in America, the inmate grapevine moves faster than the officers can keep up. Not everything is violent, though. Some of the most striking moments in North Block are the quiet ones. Early mornings when inmates brew prison coffee, a potent mix of instant powder and boiling water from a makeshift heater crafted out of metal and wires. Late nights when a man reads a novel by the dim glow of a bulb smaller than a Christmas light. Afternoons when cell doors crack open just enough to let a conversation drift between bars, two men sharing advice, stories, or regrets. And then there's the art. Some of the most detailed drawings in the world come from the cramped desks inside North Block cells, portraits made with cheap pencils, landscapes of places these men will never see again, handcrafted cards sent to family members on holidays, tattoos designed on scraps of paper that become currency or favors. For all its chaos, North Block is a place of contradictions. A place where violence and vulnerability coexist in a fragile balance. A place where men who once caused immense harm now dedicate their lives to becoming better. A place where time doesn't just pass, it stalls, stretches, and loops, trapping memories and regrets in a building older than anyone living inside it. When the final count of the night echoes through the speakers, cell doors slam shut across all 5 tiers in rapid succession, clang 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 clang, each one a reminder that in North Block, the day is never truly over. Because time doesn't move naturally here. It stands still. Watching. Waiting. Echoing through every steel bar and concrete wall of the most infamous cell block in California's Iron Gate. The Adjustment Center, known across California simply as the AC, is the darkest corner of San Quentin, the place where the state keeps the men it cannot control. If North Block is the heart of the prison, the AC is its clenched fist, a place where the worst violence, deepest isolation, and most explosive personalities collide behind thick steel doors. To most inmates, the AC is a threat whispered in warnings. To officers, it's a daily gamble, every shift a test of patience and danger. To the men who live there, it is a world apart from the rest of San Quentin. The building itself looks like a fortress within a fortress. The windows are narrow slits that let in just enough daylight to confirm that a world still exists outside. Every movement in and out requires multiple locked doors to open in a precise sequence, an audible reminder that nothing inside these walls happens by accident. Housing the most violent, politically influential, or unstable inmates, the AC is where the system sends men who refuse to follow the unspoken order of the general population. Some are gang shot callers whose influence bleeds across multiple prisons. Some are infamous aggressors, caught with weapons more than once. Others are men moments away from losing control, mentally, emotionally, or physically. But the Adjustment Center is also home to something even more notorious: Death Row's disciplinary unit. Unlike the East Block where most condemned men live, the AC holds those who fight, riot, attack officers, or break rules so violently that even Death Row needs them isolated. Every cell in the AC is a concrete vault. Solid steel door. Food port hatch. A bed bolted to the wall. A sink and toilet fused into the concrete like a cold, unblinking machine. There are no bars to look through. No view of the tier. Just a door. Just isolation. Inside, time loses meaning. Some men spend 22 to 24 hours a day locked in, emerging only for medical checks or exercise in a small, caged yard that looks like an oversized dog kennel. A patch of sky above them is the only reminder of color outside the fluorescent lights. The officers assigned to the AC walk differently here, they move with careful steps, always aware that a single mistake can become a headline. Inmates who have nothing to lose react to everything with the intensity of trapped wolves. A tray pushed through the food port is an opportunity. A hand too close to the opening is a target. Even conversation is risky. Yet officers often speak about the strange duality of the AC. The same men who have stabbed cellmates or attacked staff can also be eerily calm, polite, and conversational for weeks at a time. Violence in the AC isn't constant, it's unpredictable. That unpredictability is what makes it terrifying. One moment, an inmate may be quietly reading. The next, he may be screaming at voices only he can hear. Another may spend hours pacing like an animal, reciting gang codes under his breath. Another might sit perfectly still, staring at the metal door as if he could walk through it by will alone. And then there are the stories, the kind officers share in low voices, never officially written down, but circulated through every new generation of staff. Tales of men who sharpened steel into needles thinner than a pencil lead. Men who hid weapons in places no one would imagine. Men who waited months, just to attack the exact officer who had once handcuffed them too tightly. Stories of cells with walls scarred by decades of rage. Of inmates who refused to speak. Of others who refused to stop speaking. Of men who spent so long in isolation that the AC became their entire universe. But for all the violence, the adjustment center also houses some of the prison's clearest transformations. It's not uncommon to find men who arrived raging against the system now sitting quietly, reading philosophy, religion, or self-help books. Isolation can destroy the mind, but it can also force a man to confront himself in ways he never did before. Some inmates claim they found clarity in the AC, like the noise of the general population was replaced with a painful but powerful silence. They journal. They write poetry. They join correspondence programs. They reflect on lives shaped by trauma and decisions fueled by fury. Still, the AC never fully softens. Even the quiet is sharp. When the exercise cage is open, the atmosphere shifts instantly. Men walk out into the small enclosed yards with wrists cuffed, escorted by 2 officers. Once inside, cuffs come off through the cage slot, and the inmate is alone again, just him, the sky, and the echoes of other men pacing in their cages. Sometimes they yell across the divide, gang orders, threats, jokes, or news from the outside world. Sometimes they sit on the cold concrete and say nothing. Sometimes they test the fence with a fingertip, as if hoping for weakness. There never is one. In a place like the AC, even the smallest freedoms take on enormous weight. To feel sun on their skin. To breathe air not recycled through vents. To hear something other than their own footsteps. But the adjustment center has one truth that defines its existence. You don't come to the AC because you're dangerous. You come because you're the kind of dangerous the prison can't ignore. Some men leave the AC eventually, returning to mainline. Some transfer to other high-security prisons. Some stay indefinitely. And some never walk out alive. When the final cell check is done and the hallway lights dim to a dull glow, the AC becomes a dark, echoing cathedral of isolation. Officers step quietly. Inmates whisper to themselves or stare into nothing. Time stretches thin, every second deliberate and heavy. The adjustment center isn't just a place. It's a verdict. A reminder that even inside San Quentin, there's a deeper level of confinement. A layer of the prison reserved for the hardest men in the state. Death row at San Quentin is a world suspended between life and oblivion, where time doesn't just pass, it stalks. The men housed here are not like the rest of the population. Many are infamous. Some are forgotten. All are tethered to the same silent certainty: the state has sentenced them to die. But the phrase death row doesn't fully capture the reality. It's not an event. It's a lifestyle. A routine. A prolonged waiting room where every man knows the day may come when he is escorted down the narrow stretch of hallway known as the last mile, the path leading directly to the now dormant gas chamber and the death chamber used for lethal injection. Inside East Block, the main death row unit, the atmosphere strikes visitors immediately. The space feels heavier, darker, more claustrophobic, as if the building itself has absorbed decades of dread. The architecture is old, worn by the footsteps of men who once paced its tiers waiting for their final date. The walls carry memories no one speaks aloud. Cells in East Block are stacked 5 tiers high, stretching along corridors that feel endless, each door a cage, each cage a story. These cells aren't the cramped double bunk spaces like North Block. Most death row inmates live in single cells, narrow, tall, metallic, with a slit of a window that barely lets in light. The isolation is both a punishment and a precaution. Not just to protect staff, but to protect inmates from each other. Death row politics are different from mainline politics. The racial divisions still exist, but they're thinner here. The urgency for survival is different. There are no yards filled with hundreds of men. The interactions are fewer, quieter, more controlled. And yet, violence remains part of this world, just a more patient, calculated kind. Some men have been here for 20, 30, even 40 years. They've watched entire generations in general population rise and fall while they remain trapped in a second-by-second countdown that rarely moves forward. They call it living in limbo. On death row, routine shapes everything. Mornings begin early with officers walking the tiers, announcing count. The clang of metal doors echoes like distant thunder. Breakfast is slid through food ports: oatmeal, powdered eggs, bread. Some inmates pace immediately, walking in slow circles inside their small rectangle of space. Others remain on their bunks, staring at the ceiling, escaping into mental universes where concrete doesn't exist. Many spend hours reading. Books become lifelines. Some write letters, long, detailed messages to family members who may or may not still write back. Others craft artwork astonishing in detail, using materials so limited that creativity becomes a form of defiance. A handful pursue appeals relentlessly, their minds locked in legal battle as they fight the state for the right to live. Law books become shields. Typed motions become weapons. Jailhouse lawyers on death row are some of the most meticulous legal thinkers you'll ever meet because their very lives depend on it. Then there are the quiet ones. The men who surrendered to their sentence long ago. They don't check their legal mail with the same urgency. They don't count days anymore. They simply exist. And beneath it all is a constant, low-level hum of tension. Death row inmates don't walk the general population yards. Their outdoor time happens in small, individual cages covered with chain-link fencing, just enough room to stretch, pace, breathe real air. To them, even the sight of birds flying overhead feels like a kind of poetry. Despite the isolation, conversations happen through walls, through pipes, through the echoes of metal and concrete. A man may not see another inmate face-to-face for weeks, but he might know the sound of his neighbor's laugh, cough, or prayers by heart. Every inmate on death row knows about the last mile, the narrow, quiet hallway leading away from East Block. A path few have walked but all imagine. The final walk used to end at the gas chamber, a small green metal room with 2 leather chairs and a history so chilling that officers rarely talk about it in detail. After the gas chamber was replaced by lethal injection, the ritual changed, but the finality didn't. The execution chamber sits in an unmarked part of the prison, cold and clinical. A gurney. Straps. Stainless steel counters. A room meant to erase suffering swiftly but still soaked in the weight of every man who passed through it. Inmates speak about it in low voices. Some call it the house. Others call it the green room. But everyone knows its purpose. And yet, executions in California have been rare for decades. Legal battles, changing laws, and political shifts have turned death row into more of a holding pattern than a conveyor belt. Many men here will die of old age long before the state carries out its sentence. Some find hope in that. Others find torment. Because having decades to contemplate your own death is its own kind of punishment. The officers who work East Block know the atmosphere differs from mainline. Their steps are slower, more cautious. They read the energy of the unit minute by minute because a man with nothing to lose is unpredictable. Yet many officers form surprisingly deep connections with death row inmates, not friendships, but mutual understandings. Respect in tiny doses. The strangest truth of death row is this. Many of the men here are calmer, more polite, and more reflective than the violent personalities held in other parts of the prison. Time and inevitability reshape a person. The urgency to dominate fades. Ego softens. Regret grows. But as night falls and East Block dims, each man is returned to his own thoughts that ricochet inside a concrete box like restless ghosts. Some pray. Some cry silently. Some stare at the bars until exhaustion carries them away. Others dream of freedom they know they'll never touch. San Quentin's death row isn't just a building. It's a psychological landscape. A place where the future ends before it begins. And every day is lived in the shadow of a sentence no one can outrun. In a world built behind concrete walls and razor wire, history is often written by those we never see. From the architects who designed Pelican Bay's unforgiving corridors, to the men whose lives were shaped by them, their stories echo far beyond the prison gates. These walls were built to contain, but their impact stretches outward, touching families, communities, and generations. If this journey opened your eyes to a world rarely understood, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover more untold stories from behind the steel doors. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and remember, every locked door has a story.